So the REDCap CSS Injector external module allows users to add CSS or cascading style sheets to their surveys and data entry forms. It does require some knowledge of HTML and CSS, and you have to know how to inspect web pages in your browser because you have to find the particular elements that you are going to be styling and updating in your web page. So you can apply these styles to forms and surveys or both, and you can change the rules for individual elements. So if you apply styles across the board to all surveys or all forms, you can also specifically add certain styles to one form and not another. And if you apply more than one style to the same page, the rules are applied in the order of appearance in the configuration form. So in this CSS window, pretty much from top to bottom, that's how those rules are applied. So to give you an example of the type of thing that we're going to be doing today, we're not going to be building this today, but this is something that Terry had talked about last week during our Zoom meeting. He had taken a contact page from this is a survey that is embedded in a Drupal web page for the university, and he wanted to add it to the Drupal page, but the REDCap survey has its own style to it. So what we did was we removed the header. We had to remove the footer down here. This survey also had its own background color. The background of the survey had a dark gray, and we had lines between each of the fields that Terry wanted to get rid of. So we actually used the CSS injector to update it to the form on the right, so it looks like it's a single page instead of an embedded web page. So in REDCap surveys, this is the default design for radio buttons and for checkboxes. Now, if you want, REDCap gives you the option of using enhanced radio buttons and checkboxes, and those look like this. It allows you to extend the buttons, and this is helpful when you're answering surveys on a mobile device like a phone or a tablet. It gives you a bigger target to hit. And then, so the example that I'm going to talk about today, we actually designed for our REDCap training registration form. So these were the buttons that were set with the enhanced survey and radio button checkbox option, and we had styled them so that they look like this. So we'd given them more padding, and we've changed the shape and the color. This is the style, this is how they would look on the page, and then this is how they look when they're selected. So this is what I'm going to be demonstrating today. So the radio button, we changed the border and the shape. We added a blue border, and we rounded the shape. We rounded the corners of two of the sides. We also changed the font color, and we set the background color. We also added some padding to the buttons to give a little more space on the top and the bottom. And we also added some more space between the buttons. And then we also added some actions or some CSS rules for when the box is selected. Normally when the box is selected, or the radio button is selected, or the checkbox, it's black. And so we didn't want to keep it black. We changed it to our U of A red. We also changed the border color so that it matched the background color, and we added a box shadow so that it shows that it's selected. It kind of stands out from the page a little bit. And to give you an idea, this is the CSS rules that we created in order to implement these styles. And I'll explain each one of these as we go. But this is just to give you kind of a primer of of what the CSS looks like. Now, the important thing that we have to learn when we are applying these styles with the CSS injector is we have to understand how the page is built in HTML because there are a lot of elements and containers that REDCap builds when it builds a survey in the page. So to give you an idea just how difficult this is all the HTML code just for these two buttons here. And I know it looks like a wall of text, and people who are not code savvy might be wondering what the heck they're looking at, but this is a little visualization to help you kind of understand this HTML code. So both buttons are contained within a div container, and it's called enhanced wrapper. That's the class. And then each button separately has its own container, which is called enhanced choice, and that class is applied when you've selected the enhanced button options in your survey settings. So within this first button here, we have a container, and then we have a label element that is for the selected radio. You'll see here that this class is selected radio, meaning that it's been checked, or selected rather. And you can see here that the no button doesn't have that selected radio class. It just has a hover class. Within this label tag, we have a span class, and the class for this one is not as important as the others. But within that, we finally drill down to the actual value of the button, which is either yes, and actually in my screenshot here, this should be no, but this is for the button, and these divs and these classes are the things that we are going to want to be looking for when we update these buttons. So this is an example of the radio button, and this is an example of the checkboxes. It's a similar choice because both the radio buttons and the checkboxes in REDCap are using the enhanced choice. So they're both in an enhanced choice wrapper. They both have a class of enhanced choice, but you'll see the difference here is that where the other one was the enhanced or the selected radio, this one is selected checkbox. And that'll be important too later on because we also want to specify between the radio button and the checkbox, because if you don't select the proper elements, you'll only apply the style to one and not the other. And we want both. So with that, now I'll walk you through the building of these buttons. So let me go to my test project here. And in the survey settings, in the designer, I'm going to show you where the enhanced checkboxes are. So if you scroll down here to the survey design options, it's this option here. So if we have the standard radio buttons, that's just the little checkboxes and the little circles, and then the enhanced radio buttons and checkboxes, that's what we want to select. That's going to give us those enhanced classes that we're going to be using to make the changes and inject the CSS style. So let me save that. And let me show you the survey. So right now, this is what the survey looks like with the enhanced button. When you mouse over it with your mouse, you'll see that they change to black, and when they're selected, they're black. So we want to change that. Now, what I do, in order to find out what to change, we have to be able to know where this button is in the HTML. So if we look at view page source, This is all of the HTML that is being rendered for this page. And if you had to sift through all this, I mean, it goes on for a while. If you had to sift through this, it would take you a while to figure out where that button was. But there's an easier way. So let me close this. If we right click on this button, and this is in Firefox and Chrome, if you go all the way to the bottom and click Inspect, can you see the Inspect tab? Let me shift this over. You see both. Oh, there we go. I want you to be able to see both at the same time. So if we click Inspect here, it highlights in the Inspect tab. So if you look here, this is the choice wrapper that I showed you before. And you'll see on the left here, as I hover over each one of these, it highlights the area that we're targeting. So while I'm in this, if I wanted to add a new style to the enhanced choice, I could go up to add a new rule to the enhanced choice here. And if I said that would add a rule for that element. And you can see here, this is the div enhanced choice. So if I add it adds a space down at the bottom. I don't know if you can see that. Let me make it bigger so you can notice the difference. So that adds a space down at the bottom. It gives a little more breathing room for that. And we could build this in this Styles tab. And once you're happy with the styles that you've added, you could add that to the CSS injector. So what I'm going to do is build this for you and show you how this is done. So let me close this. And I have, let me close my presentation here. So these are the rules that I'm going to build. And I've copied them over into this notepad so that way you could see it as we add them. And the first thing we're going to do is, let me talk to you about class selection for a little bit. So in this button, as we saw in the presentation, it's a div with a class and enhanced choice. And in order to select that, we would say div period enhanced choice. That's a way of CSS saying that I want all div containers that have a class of enhanced choice. And what's that going to do? That's going to allow me to select all these containers around each of these buttons. I don't need the container wrapper, the enhanced choice wrapper. I can drill down to just the individual buttons, but I'm selecting these buttons here and these buttons down here. And then in order to actually style the button, I have to drill down even further and go to the label element, and that's where I'm going to add my border radius to change the shape and to add the different color border. I'll also add the background color and the color of the font and add some padding. So let me slide this over here so I can keep it up. And So when I select the button, you can see down here that I'm in a div that's enhanced choice, and then this is the label, and that's what I want. So it's div enhanced choice label. Let me make this a little smaller, or this a little bigger. So this is where I want to be making my changes. So let me just hide that one for now. And so the first thing I want to do is add my border radius. And these values are being assigned clockwise. So this is top, right, bottom, and left. So I'm adding a roundness to the corner by 15 pixels to the top, 3 pixels to the right, 15 to the bottom, and 3 to the left. And I have to say important so that it overrides all the other settings for border radius.
One important note while we're looking at this, understand that what Manuel's doing here is something that you can do without the CSS injector. This is just a matter of getting a view of what you're going to want to apply to the CSS injector. So he's going to ultimately apply this to that module, but this is so valuable if you want to learn how to play around and then capture these items that you're going to use in the injector ultimately to make it look like what you're seeing here. What he's doing here is something that's going to disappear as soon as he closes these tools. You'll need to apply what he's doing here ultimately to the module. He'll show you that, but I just want to make sure that as you're watching this, you understand that you can't just make the change here and just admire your work and then leave it and expect everything to change, because that won't happen. You're going to need to apply it to the injector. So, okay, go ahead.
Right, that's a good point, Terry. And the reason I do it this way is because it allows me to make these design changes on the fly, and also because it allows me to make sure that I'm targeting the element that I want to be targeting, and I'm not applying this rule somewhere else and pulling my hair out trying to figure out why these styles aren't working. Because if you do it in the CSS injector, you would have to add the rule to the CSS injector, save it, go back to the survey, refresh, see if it worked, go back to the injector, change it, and you're going back and forth, back and forth. Whereas here, I can do it on the fly. So if I don't want 15 pixels for the radius, I want 20. If I want to make it a little more round, I can do that immediately. And I could see it update in real time instead of having to toggle back and forth and back and forth. And what I would do after I have these is I would copy these and paste them into another text field or a notepad, and then I would have those, and then I would apply them all together into the CSS Injector module. So the next thing we did is change the border color, so that's border. And then what this does is I'm saying how thick I want the border. I'm saying what kind of line type I want for the border. And then finally I'm saying what color I want for the border. And then once again I have to say important so that it overrides all of the other border settings. Because you can see here if I take out the important, it stays black because this down here, this border color is saying that it's black. and it's important. So I'm overriding that on my own. And then the next thing I did was color the text. And once again, I have to put important. And then I changed the background color of the button. I didn't have to, but one of the things you want to do is if you're setting a style and you're not sure if that style is being set elsewhere, it's a good thing to hard code it in there. So right now you can see the button color is already white up here. And I've unchecked that one just so I could show you when I add the background color. So what I would do is I would add the background color in my own rules, and it won't let me edit that one, so let me go back to this one, and I'll say background color.
And notice that all these colors that he's adding are HTML color codes, all available. Just Google HTML colors and you'd be able to find any color you want and the code that applies to that color.
And in here, once you have the color set, you can click on the little box next to it and change it however you want with the color picker. And that's usually how I do it. That's how I came up with these colors here. I don't know hexadecimal by heart. I know a few of them by heart, but not many. And so finally, then I added some padding to give the text some breathing space. And you can shorthand the padding. Any of these box model settings, padding, margin, border radius, you can shorthand if the two values for top and bottom are the same and for left and right are the same, you can just add the two values and HTML automatically knows that if there's two values here, you want the first value to apply to top and bottom and the second value to apply left and right. So that saves you some time. So now that we have these styles for the enhanced choice label, you can see that my label looks just like it was in the presentation I gave earlier. Now you can see here that when I hover over them, instead of them being black, they disappear completely. And so the next thing I have to do is add rules for the hover and for the selected choice. So if I select that one, you'll see here that there's a div enhanced choice selected radio button. And these three rules here, this one is for the selected radio, this is for the selected checkbox, and this is for the hover. And what I'm doing here is I'm changing the border of it to the red background that we have. I'm changing the font color to white. I'm changing the background color to red. This is the U of A red. And then I'm adding a box shadow. So if I go into here, and we'll just unselect that one. Now I'll add the border. Nope. And sometimes you'll run into this where it's not letting me apply that style because that style is being applied elsewhere. So what I would do is I would select this and then I would add.
You need to change the @ sign to a pound sign.
Oh, that would work too. Good thing Terry's watching while I type. There we go. So then we're going to change the font color to white. And we're going to change the background color so you can see the font. I do find it interesting that the hex code for our U of A red has the that has the 520 in it for our area code. And now we're going to add a box shadow. And this, what we do is you select the first value is your vertical offset. The first value is your horizontal offset, how far you want the shadow to be shifted, left or right. The second value is your vertical offset, how high you want the shadow to be shifted top to bottom. And the third value is for blur, how blurry do you want the shadow, or do you want it to be crisp and sharp. And then there's other values you can add, but with just these three, it's horizontal, vertical, and blur, and then the color of the shadow. So let me add that. And a lot of these are trial and error. I don't have these hard-coded in my brain whenever I create things. I usually just start messing around and see what looks good. And then once I get it dialed in, that's whenever I apply it. So now you can see that when we select a button, that these options have been selected now. And you'll see here now that the styles have been applied. Now, like Terry said, if I refresh this, it all goes away. So hopefully you wrote it down. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this, and I'm going to keep these open, because we're going to apply it to our CSS injector. Now, Terry and I are the only people, and Colleen, our REDCap staff, are the only people who can enable modules for users. So if there are any modules that you want to see or use in your project, you would email us at redcap@email.arizona.edu, and we would enable it for you. We would just need to know the name of the project and the name of the module you want. And if you aren't sure what modules are available, you can go to our website, and this is the website Terry was talking about. This is our CB2 REDCap website, and you would be able to see all of the modules that are available to be implemented in your project. So I'll scroll down, and you'll see here this is a REDCap CSS Injector, and there's some screenshots that'll kind of walk you through setting it up. There's some links for documentation. All of these modules are created by outside people who get them submitted to Vanderbilt and for REDCap, and they get accepted. And so a lot of these modules have their own GitHub pages that are maintained by the developers. And so a lot of the documentation will take you to a GitHub link. And but some of these are a little more in depth. Some of them just kind of give you an overview of what is available. For example, the Shazam one is a bit more in depth because it gives you walks you through how to build using Shazam and some examples. But if you want to look at any of the external modules, they're on this page up here. And then what Terry was talking about earlier too is on our video tutorials page. If you click there, all of the Red Zone videos that we're adding will be in this section here, but there's also one for REDCap training that Terry has, and also other videos that we've pulled from other sites, including REDCap for use. Anybody who wants to view those can view those. So back to the demo here. So I've already enabled this module. Now I would configure it. And right now it's disabled. So let me just delete this because we'll start from scratch. The first thing you would want to do is you would enable it. And then the second thing is you want to decide whether you only want to apply these styles to surveys and forms, or just forms. And right now I'm only going to be using surveys because these enhanced choices are only available for surveys. But let's say you wanted to apply a style where all of your field labels are, U of A red. Instead of having to go through and label and use the rich text editor to create all your labels and turn them to U of A red, you could apply that style here by selecting all. You would leave this blank, so they would say everything, all your surveys, all your instruments, and then you would put your rule in here for your font to all your labels to be U of A red, and then it would apply across the board. If you wanted one set of labels to be U of A red, wanted another set of labels to be U of A blue on a different instrument, you would apply that to another set of forms. So you can apply multiple sets of rules as you go. So right now I only have one form, so I'm just going to go registration modify. And then what I would do is I would select my CSS rules that I've added, and then I would just put them in. One thing that would be nice about this, if there was a way for you to see or make this box a little bigger, that's one of the reasons why I do a lot of coding separately in a text form like this. I use Atom. Is because I want to be able to see what I'm doing. This is a really tiny box to try to figure out what if you didn't, forgot something or. So once we add this back to, so I think I have my survey open still. So our survey looks like this now. But when I go back and save the CSS rules, now our buttons look like this. And even though I've only been showing you these buttons, all of the buttons that pop up are styled the same way. So does anybody have any questions, anything they want me to explain a little more or expand on?
One thing I want to point out about all of our external modules, some are very easy to understand based on the documentation that comes along with them because the module does something fairly simple. And so, I've never found that software engineers are generally very good at documenting things for a normal user. They don't speak the same language. So you'll get a variety of valuable comments or documentation when you look at our external modules. That's one of the reasons that we decided to use these times for these Thursday red zone sessions to actually flush these out a little bit and give you the chance to see firsthand how these things work, whether it's something that interests you or not, and how. And then you can always refer back to these videos, which I think are far more helpful than just the documentation by itself. So, no questions? I understand because this is really advanced, and I understand that, and why we try to also make sure we post what we're going to be demoing before the Thursday sessions. But there's just a lot of useful information in this, so I hope you got something out of it. The HTML was reasonably basic. The one thing about HTML, as Manuel would type in certain things, you saw there was an auto-completion of sorts. You can always go and Google things to help you if you want to try and do a little bit more programming and look and see how things are auto-completing and whatever, and he's typing in right now sort of a place that you can go for help if you want to experiment with these kinds of things. So again, hopefully you've enjoyed this. I'm going to turn it back over to manual to close out, and whenever you're done manual, then we'll go ahead and call it a day.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, so for a basic beginner's HTML training, this is a good site because it walks you through HTML basics, and you could go through all the elements. It talks to you about how these elements are structured, and even gives you more in depth about what each element is. So if you could also type in before I go to that, it also does CSS. So when we talked about selectors, this gives you a good overview of the selectors, and when you're selecting classes, like I said about when you have to do like dot center, dot enhanced choice, that's a class, and if you're adding it, so these would pick all the paragraph tags that have a class of center. So this site is a really good site here, but you could also type in, like if I just did CSS selectors, you'll see here that this pops up for that, or if I just did HTML table, W3 schools pops up again, but this will specifically go through each of the table tags. So if you have any questions about HTML, you can always just put it in Google. If you just say HTML and then whatever you want afterwards, div, most of the time H3 Schools pops up, and it allows you to type some of the code yourself. So if you want to try it yourself, there's a little sandbox for you to play with. So if you wanted to add your own code here, you can see that it updates for you, so you don't have to install any programs to run this. If you want to teach yourself some HTML, these are good sites for it. So with that, thanks everybody. I hope that helped. If you guys have any questions about the CSS Injector, I mean, if you're trying to build something and it's not quite working out, or if you're running into some problems, we're always happy to help. You just shoot us an email or submit a request ticket to us, and we're always excited to help people and kind of further REDCap's knowledge and usefulness for other people, because if you have fun with it, we have fun with it, and then if everybody's having fun with it, then people will use it a lot more. So thanks a lot.